Life Stories brings you powerful real-life experiences that inspire change and reflection. Today's story is about a successful CEO who goes undercover in his own store only to face shocking discrimination from his own employees. What happens when the man who built a company on fairness and respect discovers that those very values have been lost? Will he walk away? Or will he take action to restore what truly matters? Stay with us as we uncover this emotional journey of truth, leadership, and transformation. Subscribe to Life Stories to begin today's story. Saturday morning. Just after 10 a.m. I adjusted the brim of my baseball cap in the rearview mirror, barely recognizing the man staring back at me. Not the CEO who had built a multi-million-dollar retail empire. Not the man who sat in high-rise boardrooms making decisions that shaped the future of my company. No, today I was just another face in the crowd, dressed in a plain hoodie, worn jeans, and carrying a weathered canvas bag slung over my shoulder like any other customer stepping out for weekend errands. The sun was already high, casting sharp reflections off the windshields in the crowded parking lot of Carter & Company, the retail brand I had poured my life into. The store in front of me stood tall and proud, the company's bold logo gleaming in the sunlight. It had been years since I had personally walked through these doors, not as the owner, but as a customer. The question nagging at me now was whether the warmth and inclusivity I had built this company upon had truly endured. I took a deep breath, steadying myself before stepping forward. There was an odd thrill in this disguise, a mix of anticipation and unease. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't walking into a space where people rushed to greet me with rehearsed politeness or where employees subtly straightened their postures in my presence. Today, I was just James Carter, an ordinary man, testing whether my business still reflected the values I had envisioned. Whispers of dissatisfaction had been surfacing in recent months, subtle complaints about poor service, dismissiveness, and even bias among my staff. If there was truth to these claims, I needed to see it with my own eyes, not as a CEO reading a neatly summarized report, but as someone who would feel it firsthand. Stepping inside, I was greeted by the familiar hum of retail life. The air conditioning provided an immediate relief from the Georgia heat, and the scent of fresh cardboard and new merchandise lingered in the air. The store buzzed with activity, shoppers moving between aisles, carts filled with household essentials and toys, children's laughter mingling with the rhythmic beeps of checkout scanners. At first glance, everything seemed to be running smoothly. Employees in company uniforms moved efficiently through the store, some assisting customers, others restocking shelves with practiced ease. It looked normal. But I wasn't here for appearances. I was here to dig deeper. Pausing near a display of brightly colored kitchen appliances, I observed the staff interactions. A young woman in a striped uniform jacket stood nearby, engaging attentively with a customer, explaining product features with enthusiasm. She exuded warmth, the kind of genuine engagement I wanted my brand to be known for. A few feet away, another employee, a young man in his 20s, was stacking items with a methodical but detached air. There was no energy, no connection with the shoppers bustling around him. But it was the electronics section that truly caught my attention. At the far end of the store, a young employee leaned lazily against the counter, phone in hand, his attention fully absorbed in whatever was on the screen. He didn't seem to register the customers moving through his department, let alone me as I wandered closer. I reached for a pair of headphones, turning them over in my hands, pretending to consider a purchase. A simple test, one that required no grand effort. A smile, a greeting, or even a brief acknowledgement would have been enough. But nothing came. Not even a glance. I stood there for a moment longer, waiting, giving him every opportunity to look up and do the bare minimum. But it was as if I didn't exist. An uncomfortable knot formed in my stomach. Was this carelessness? A bad day? Or something deeper? Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. One experience didn't define a store's culture. I moved on, observing from different angles. Near the home goods section, an elderly woman hesitated, scanning the store as though looking for help. Before I could intervene, another employee, a young woman with a bright, friendly smile, approached her with a soft greeting, immediately setting her at ease. The older woman's face relaxed, gratitude evident in the small nods she gave as they spoke. It was a stark contrast to what I had just experienced. And yet, something pulled me back to the electronics counter. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was an unspoken need to give that young man another chance. This time, I picked up a boxed set of Bluetooth speakers and placed them deliberately on the counter, a gesture that should have naturally drawn attention. The employee finally looked up. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice flat, his face blank. The indifference in his tone was striking. But I offered him a polite smile nonetheless. "Yeah. I was wondering if you could tell me a bit more about these. Are they good for outdoor use?" He barely glanced at the box before shrugging. "I don't know. Probably." His attention had already drifted back toward his phone. I blinked, momentarily taken aback. Surely, he wasn't serious. I kept my voice calm. "Could you maybe check? I want to be sure before I buy them." A long sigh escaped him, as though my request was some monumental inconvenience. Without a word, he snatched the box, flipped it over, and skimmed the back. "It says here they're weatherproof," he muttered, shoving it back toward me with zero enthusiasm. Frustration flickered inside me. "Okay. And do you know if they're compatible with most devices?" This time, he rolled his eyes. "Look, man. All the details are right here on the box. You can read it yourself." He motioned vaguely toward the shelf. "Or pick something else. Doesn't matter to me." A heavy silence hung between us, broken only by the distant murmur of the store. For a moment, I just stared at him. Not with anger, but with sheer disappointment. This wasn't just inattentiveness. This was outright dismissiveness. I glanced around. Other customers were being welcomed, assisted, engaged. A white couple near the front was receiving personalized attention from the same employee who had helped the elderly woman earlier. Yet here I was, barely acknowledged. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just a bad attitude. It was something bigger. Something that had been allowed to fester. I took a slow breath, keeping my tone neutral. "You seem busy," I said. "Is there someone else who might be able to help?" The employee smirked, a slight curl at the edge of his mouth. "I don't think anyone's free right now. Just figure it out." "All right." The words stung. Not in the way a rude comment might, but in what they implied. Because if this was how I, a random customer, was being treated today, how many others had left this store feeling the same quiet sting of indifference? And more importantly, how had I let this happen in my own company? I stood there for a long moment, the boxed speakers still in my hands. The young employee had already turned away, his focus drifting back to his phone. As if I had never been there. The weight of what had just happened pressed against my chest. But instead of walking out, I placed the speakers back on the shelf and took a slow breath. This wasn't just bad customer service. It felt personal. I had built this company on the idea that every customer mattered, no exceptions. No one should walk into my store and feel invisible, unimportant, or dismissed. But today, I had felt it myself. I turned away from the electronics section, deciding to continue my quiet investigation. If this was just one employee's bad attitude, I needed to be sure. But if it was more than that, if this was a pattern, then I had a far bigger problem on my hands. Wandering into the clothing section, I found a young Latina employee neatly folding shirts at a display table. She looked up as I approached, flashing a warm, genuine smile. "Good morning, sir. Let me know if you need help with anything." Her voice was bright, welcoming. The simple act of acknowledgement felt like a stark contrast to what I had just experienced. I lingered near the shirts, pretending to browse. She moved to assist an elderly man nearby, helping him find the right size and even suggesting a matching tie. Her patience was unwavering, and his appreciation was obvious in the way he nodded and smiled at her suggestions. This was the kind of service I had envisioned for my company. But as I moved toward the home goods section, a quiet conversation stopped me in my tracks. Two employees, both young, both leaning casually against a shelf, were engaged in a hushed but unmistakably dismissive exchange. "That guy over there," one of them muttered, jerking his head subtly in my direction. "He's probably just here to browse. People like him never buy anything big." I felt my jaw tighten. I kept my eyes on a set of pots and pans, pretending not to hear. The other employee chuckled. "Yeah. He doesn't look like he's got the cash for this stuff. Probably just wasting time." My hands curled into fists at my sides. They didn't know who I was. To them, I was just another black man walking around the store. And that was enough for them to assume I wasn't worth their attention. It was a gut punch, not because I hadn't heard things like this before, but because it was happening in my own store. The ease with which they dismissed me spoke volumes. This wasn't just about one bad employee or a random act of rudeness. This was a culture that had taken root. One that had been allowed to fester in the very company I had built with the promise of inclusivity and respect. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. Now wasn't the time to react. Instead, I walked toward the checkout area, my mind racing. At the register, a middle-aged black woman was ringing up customers. Her name tag reading Lisa. Her demeanor was professional and kind, her voice steady as she greeted each person with a smile. When my turn came, she looked up, still smiling. "Did you find everything okay?" I hesitated for just a moment before shaking my head. "Not exactly," I admitted. "I think I'll hold off for now." Lisa's smile faltered slightly, but she nodded. "Well, if you need anything, just let us know. We're here to help." And I believed her. Her sincerity was genuine. And for a brief moment, it softened the weight pressing on my chest. But it also highlighted something unsettling: the inconsistency. Why were some employees so welcoming, while others treated me like an afterthought? As I stepped outside, the Georgia heat hit me like a wave. I made my way to my car, sitting behind the wheel for a long moment, staring at the store that bore my company's name. This business was supposed to represent opportunity, fairness, respect. Yet, the experiences I had today told a different story. The dismissiveness from the electronics employee lingered in my mind. But it was those quiet comments I had overheard in the home goods section that cut the deepest. These weren't just isolated incidents. They hinted at a much bigger issue, one that had gone unchecked for far too long. I thought back to the early days of this business, when I had personally trained managers, when I had hired staff based on values that I believed in. Back then, I had emphasized the importance of treating every customer like family, regardless of how much they spent or who they were. But as the company had grown, those personal touches had become harder to maintain. Delegation had become necessary. But had it come at the cost of my company's core values? Had my managers fostered an environment of respect? Or had they allowed subtle prejudices to take root? Had I failed my own company? I took a deep breath, reaching for the small notebook I kept in my glove compartment. I flipped it open, jotting down my thoughts. This wasn't just about fixing one store. This was about ensuring that every employee, in every location, understood the responsibility of representing this brand. It was about accountability from the top down. But before I could rebuild, before I could begin to fix what had gone wrong, I knew there was one more step to take. A step that would reveal just how deep the problem truly ran. I wasn't done yet. Sitting in my car, I stared at the store, my store, feeling a storm of emotions swell inside me. Disappointment, frustration, a sense of failure I hadn't felt in years. But I had a choice. I could drive away, let my anger simmer, and let this be just another bad experience. Or I could do something about it. I reached for the door handle and stepped back into the store. This time, I wasn't an anonymous customer. I walked toward the customer service desk with purpose. My heart beat steady. The young woman working there gave me a polite smile. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yes," I said. My voice calm but firm. "I'd like to speak with the store manager." She hesitated for a second, probably wondering if I had a complaint, before nodding. "Of course. One moment." A few minutes later, a man in his late 40s approached me. His name tag read Brian. His posture was professional, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "How can I help you today?" he asked. I extended a hand. "James Carter," I said, watching as his face immediately changed. His eyes widened. His breath caught just slightly. He knew exactly who I was. "Mr. Carter," he said quickly, recovering his composure. "It's an honor to meet you. If I had known you were coming." I held up a hand to stop him. "That's the point, Brian. You weren't supposed to know." His face flushed. "I came in today as a regular customer," I continued, "to see how things really run when no one is watching. And what I saw, it wasn't good." Brian's expression shifted to concern. "I'm sorry to hear that. Could you tell me what happened?" I did. I told him about the electronics employee who dismissed me, about the blatantly racist remarks I overheard in Home Goods. I told him about Lisa, the cashier who showed true professionalism, and the Latina employee in clothing who embodied the values I wanted in every store. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The weight of disappointment carried more than enough force. Brian shifted uncomfortably. I wasn't aware of these issues," he admitted. "I always try to make sure our team follows company values." I nodded. "I believe you. But clearly, something is slipping through the cracks. And it's not just your responsibility, it's mine, too." He straightened slightly at that. "Listening. Somewhere along the way," I said, "I let our company culture become diluted. That ends today." I took a deep breath. "I need you to gather your staff. Right now." Brian blinked. "All of them? All of them?" A few minutes later, the employees were assembled in the break room. The atmosphere was tense, filled with quiet murmurs and uneasy glances. I stood before them not as a mystery customer, but as their leader. "Good afternoon," I said, my voice steady. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is James Carter. I'm the founder and CEO of this company." A ripple of whispers moved through the group. "I came here today," I continued, "undercover. Not to trick anyone. Not to punish anyone. But to see, firsthand, how customers are treated when no one thinks the boss is watching." The room fell silent. "What I saw today was troubling," I said. "Some of you demonstrated kindness, professionalism, the kind of attitude this company was built on." My eyes flicked toward Lisa, who nodded subtly. But others, I let my gaze sweep across the room, stopping for a fraction of a second on the young man from the electronics section. His face had failed to meet even the most basic standard of respect. I could feel the tension tighten around me, but I kept my voice measured. "And that failure isn't just on you," I said. "It's on me. Because somewhere along the way, I let the culture of this company slip. And that changes now." I turned back to Brian. "Starting today, we're implementing mandatory training on bias and customer service. Not just here, everywhere. It's not enough to assume people know how to treat others with respect. We need to teach it, reinforce it, and hold people accountable." Brian nodded. "Understood, Mr. Carter. I'll make sure it happens." I looked back at the employees. "Second," I said, "I'll be visiting more stores in person. Unannounced. This isn't about catching people off guard, it's about staying connected. I want to see firsthand what's happening in my company." Some employees exchanged nervous glances. But a few, like Lisa, nodded in quiet agreement. "Lastly," I said, my voice softening. I want to hear from you. What's working? What's not? If there are issues with leadership, with policies, I need to know. My door is open. And I'll be making sure there's a way to report concerns anonymously if anyone feels uncomfortable speaking up directly. The employees seemed to relax slightly. I took that as a sign that the message had landed. I exhaled, looking at each of them. I started this company because I wanted to create something different. A place where every customer, no matter who they are, felt valued. Somewhere along the way, we lost a little of that. But I'm not giving up on it. And I know we can do better. I turned toward Lisa, stepping closer. And Lisa, I said, offering her a genuine smile. Thank you. You reminded me today why I started this business. Her expression softened. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I just try to treat people the way I'd want to be treated. A simple but profound truth. As I walked out of the store for the second time that day, the weight in my chest felt different. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. Fixing a culture was far harder than building a company from scratch. But this was necessary. And if today had proven anything, it was that sometimes facing hard truths was the only way forward. As I drove away from the store, the weight of the day settled on me. What I had witnessed wasn't just a failure in customer service, it was a reflection of a deeper issue. One I had unknowingly allowed to take root. But now, I had the chance to fix it. To rebuild the culture I had once envisioned. Change wouldn't happen overnight. But it would happen, starting today. Sometimes, the hardest truths lead to the most important transformations. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to Life Stories for more real-life lessons that inspire change.